John hesitated, his hand gripping the door handle. The wind outside howled like a living thing, rattling the windows and sending icy flakes swirling into the cabin. The fire crackled behind him, its warmth a sharp contrast to the brutal cold seeping in from the open doorway. He hadn't expected visitors. Especially not this. A thin, trembling German shepherd stood in the knee-deep snow, her body hunched against the wind. Her fur, soaked from the storm, clung to her ribs, too visible, too sharp beneath her coat. And then he saw them. 2 tiny pups pressed against her side. They barely moved, their small forms shivering violently, buried half in the snow. Their eyes, barely open, darted to him for only a second before burying themselves deeper into their mother's fur. The mother didn't step forward. She didn't bark, whimper, or try to run. She just stood there, frozen in place, as if she had used every last ounce of her strength just to make it here. John's breath came out in a cloud of mist. His heart pounded as he looked past them, scanning the road. Nothing. No footprints leading up to the house, no car tracks in the fresh snow. No sign of where they had come from. Just an empty, white wasteland. The mother dog lifted her head slightly, her deep brown eyes locking onto his. And in that moment, he understood. She wasn't asking for herself. She was asking for them. John swallowed, his throat tight. He told himself he wouldn't do this again. Not after Max. Max had been his best friend, his only companion since he'd retired. The day he lost him, John had promised himself, no more dogs. No more heartbreak. And yet, here they were. A mother, too weak to stand much longer. 2 tiny lives, barely holding on. John exhaled slowly, his hand tightening on the doorframe. If he shut the door, would they make it through the night? The wind howled again, and the mother wobbled on her legs, swaying slightly. His chest ached. Damn it. He stepped aside. Come in. The mother hesitated, her body stiff. Then, as if every muscle had finally given up, her legs buckled beneath her. John lunged forward, catching her just before she hit the frozen ground. She was so light. Too light. He knelt in the doorway, scooping up the pups in his free arm. Tiny. Cold. Fragile. He carried them inside, gently lowering the mother onto the thick rug near the fire. She let out a deep, exhausted sigh, curling protectively around her pups. John shut the door, sealing out the storm. He didn't know where they had come from. He didn't know who had left them to die. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a chance. Something had led them here. And for the first time in years, John realized. Maybe he wasn't meant to be alone anymore. John moved quickly, shutting the door behind him, sealing out the howling wind and the thick blanket of snow that had nearly swallowed the fragile family whole. He turned the lock, then checked it twice. The mother dog barely stirred, but her eyes flickered to the door, watching him carefully. The warmth of the cabin hit them immediately. The mother let out a heavy breath, her ribs rising and falling in slow, exhausted movements. The 2 pups pressed against her, their tiny bodies still shivering despite the growing warmth. John grabbed the thickest blanket he could find, wrapping it carefully around them, tucking them in like fragile newborns. He moved quickly, kneeling beside them, rubbing slow, steady circles into their damp fur. He had no idea how long they had been out in the cold, but by the looks of them, it had been too long. "You're okay now," he murmured. "Just hang in there." The mother dog barely responded. She curled her body around her pups, pulling them close, shielding them even now. Her ears twitched slightly, reacting to every gust of wind outside. John ran a hand down his face. He had spent years keeping to himself, avoiding problems that weren't his. He had told himself over and over that taking in another dog would be too painful after what happened to Max. But now, in his cabin, in his home, sat 3 lives that had nowhere else to go. He grabbed an old towel, carefully patting down the mother's icy fur. "Where did you come from?" he asked quietly. She didn't react to his voice, didn't flinch under his touch. That should have reassured him. But it didn't. Something about her still felt wrong. Not in a dangerous way. Not aggressive. But off. The fire crackled, throwing flickering shadows across the wooden walls. The wind rattled the windows, a constant, howling force. And yet, in the warmth of the cabin, with safety all around them, the mother dog remained tense. Her body wasn't shaking from the cold anymore. But she still wasn't relaxed. John frowned. He had seen scared strays before. He had seen abandoned dogs, lost animals. But she wasn't acting like one. She wasn't scanning the room, looking for an escape. She wasn't sniffing around, searching for food or comfort. She was staring at the door. John's heart tightened. The fire popped loudly, sending a flicker of sparks up the chimney. Outside, the wind roared, making the walls creak. But she didn't react to the storm. Her ears twitched at something else. John followed her gaze, turning slowly toward the door. Nothing. Just the heavy wooden frame, locked and bolted. So why did she still look afraid? His fingers curled against his knee, uneasy. Was she waiting for someone? His breath slowed. He glanced at the pups, still buried deep in the blankets, their tiny bodies rising and falling with weak, steady breaths. She had gotten them this far. But how? His eyes flicked toward the frost-covered window. The snow outside was deep, untouched. There had been no footprints. No signs of anyone else. But what if there had been, before the storm buried them? John stood slowly, crossing the room in 3 careful steps. He peered out through the window, squinting against the thick layer of ice creeping along the glass. The world outside was nothing but white. Snow piled in deep drifts against the trees, the wind swirling through the darkness like an unforgiving force. No movement. No tracks. Nothing. He exhaled, rubbing his arms. Maybe he was being paranoid. Maybe she was just a dog that had been abandoned, left to fend for herself in the cold. But then, as he turned back toward the fireplace, he met her eyes again. And it was there. Not just fear. A warning. John's stomach tightened. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't afraid of the storm. She was afraid of what might still be out there. He reached for the deadbolt again, checking it instinctively. Still locked. Still secure. The fire crackled, throwing light over the mother dog's face. Her deep brown eyes were locked on the door, her ears flicking at every slight sound, every gust of wind. John swallowed. He wasn't sure what she had been running from. But something told him it hadn't stopped chasing her yet. John barely slept that night. The storm had raged on, but inside the cabin, the air had been thick with something heavier than just the cold. The mother dog hadn't moved from her spot near the door. Even as exhaustion pulled at her, her ears stayed sharp, twitching at every sound beyond the cabin walls. John had stayed up watching her. Watching the way her body stiffened every time the wind changed. Watching the way her eyes never fully closed. Watching the way she listened, not just for safety, but for something she expected. Something she feared. By morning, the storm had eased into a quiet snowfall, the sky a pale, icy blue. John bundled up the pups in a blanket and gently helped the mother dog into his truck. She didn't fight him, didn't resist, but her eyes never left the tree line as he backed out of the driveway. The trip to town was a quiet one. The pups, now warm, squirmed lazily in the blankets on the passenger seat. The mother sat in the back, watching the road with cautious eyes. John glanced at her in the mirror. "You've been through something, haven't you?" She didn't blink. The vet's office was small, just a single-story clinic at the edge of town. Dr. Whitaker had been the only veterinarian in the area for years. He'd patched up more farm dogs and stray cats than anyone John knew. The moment John walked in, the vet frowned at the sight of the dogs. "Where'd you find them?" John sighed. "Showed up at my place in the middle of the storm." Whitaker gestured toward the exam table. John placed the pups down first. The little one squirmed, still weak but clearly stronger than the night before. The vet ran his hands over them, checking their ribs, their paws, their bellies. Malnourished, Whitaker muttered. But they'll pull through. John nodded. He had expected that. It was the mother dog he was worried about. When he lifted her onto the table, she tensed beneath his hands. Her ribs were sharp, her fur still dull from lack of nutrition. Whitaker hummed under his breath as he checked her over, inspecting an old scar on her shoulder, testing her reflexes. Then, he reached for the scanner. Let's see if she's got a chip. John hadn't let himself hope too much. The chances of a stray having a microchip were slim. Still, he held his breath as Whitaker ran the scanner over her neck. Beep. John froze. The vet frowned, checking the screen. Huh. She's got an owner. John's heart kicked against his ribs. He leaned closer as the vet typed in the identification number. The screen blinked for a moment before pulling up the registered information. Then John saw the name. And the blood in his veins went cold. The registered owner had been missing for years. John felt a strange, sinking weight settle in his chest. His fingers curled against the edge of the exam table. Missing. Not rehomed. Not deceased. Missing. The mother dog let out a sudden, sharp whimper, startling them both. She shifted on the table, her body stiff, her eyes darting toward the door. John's hands tightened. She knew. He didn't know how, but she remembered something. The vet exhaled. This can't be right. He pointed at the file on the screen. She was reported missing along with her owner years ago. No sightings. No updates. John looked at the mother dog. Her breath had quickened, her tail stiff. She was out in that storm for a reason, John murmured. The vet nodded slowly. And I don't think she got there by accident. The mother dog let out another whimper, her nails scraping against the metal table. She had led John to the vet's office. But where had she been before that? John glanced at the screen again. The missing woman's name flashed in bold letters. Claire Dawson. He didn't recognize it. But he recognized the town she had lived in, only a few miles from where he had found the dog. The mother dog let out a soft, low whine, as if urging him to understand. John leaned against the table, rubbing his jaw. What happened to you? He muttered. The vet tapped the screen. Her file doesn't say much. Just that she was registered to Claire Dawson 5 years ago. Then, a missing persons report was filed a year later. John frowned. No updates since? The vet shook his head. None. It's like she vanished without a trace. John looked at the mother dog again. She was the only trace left. The pups let out soft yips, curling closer to her side. She lowered her head, licking the tops of their tiny heads in a soothing motion. But her body remained tense. She was still waiting. Still expecting something. John's gut twisted. If Claire Dawson had disappeared years ago, how had her dog survived this long? Has someone taken care of her? Or had she been running ever since? John glanced at the vet. Do you have any contacts in law enforcement? Someone who could look into this? Whitaker sighed. I know a guy. Retired sheriff. He might still have access to old case files. John nodded. Call him. The vet hesitated. You really think this dog could lead to something? John looked at the mother dog, at the way she never let her guard down. I don't know, he admitted. But I have a feeling she didn't show up at my door by accident. The vet picked up the phone, dialing a number. John stepped away, glancing down at the pups. Their tiny chests rose and fell steadily now, their bodies no longer trembling from the cold. But something inside him told him this wasn't over. The mother dog had brought them here for a reason. And whatever she had been running from might still be out there. John sat at his kitchen table, the glow from his laptop screen casting long shadows across the dimly lit room. A steaming cup of coffee sat untouched beside him, forgotten as he scrolled through page after page of old news reports. The name Claire Dawson stared back at him from the screen, the details of her disappearance chilling in their simplicity. She had vanished 3 years ago. No sign of forced entry. No financial activity after her disappearance. No body ever found. Just, gone. John exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. The case had gone cold quickly, barely making it past the first few weeks of investigation. The police had no leads, no suspects. Except for one. Daniel Holloway. Claire's ex-boyfriend. John's jaw clenched as he read through the details. Multiple domestic disturbances. A history of violent behavior. A restraining order filed just months before Claire vanished. And yet, no arrests. John clicked on a grainy photo of the man from an old police report. Cold, dead eyes stared back at him. The kind of man who didn't take no for an answer. He looked over at the mother dog, curled up near the fireplace. Her pups were tucked safely against her, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm with hers. She had survived. But how? Had Claire run away to escape him? Or had something worse happened? John's gut twisted. The mother dog was the only piece left of Claire Dawson's story. And John had a feeling she knew more than anyone else. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the cabin windows. The snow had finally stopped, leaving behind a heavy silence. John pushed away from the table, walking over to the front door. He checked the lock out of habit, his fingers brushing over the cool metal. He wasn't sure why he felt uneasy. The mother dog let out a low, rumbling growl. John turned back. She was no longer resting. She was sitting up, ears alert, her body stiff. Then, scrape. John's pulse kicked hard. It was faint. Just a whisper of sound against the wood. Then again. Scrape. Scrape. From the back door. John moved slowly, careful not to make a sound. The mother dog stood up fully now, her lips peeling back, a deep warning growl building in her throat. John's fingers curled into fists. Someone was out there. Watching. Waiting. And if the look in the mother dog's eyes was any indication, she had been waiting for them, too. The growl in the mother dog's throat deepened, turning into something almost primal. Her body was tense, her muscles coiled as if preparing to spring. John moved carefully toward the back door, his heart beat loud in his ears. He pressed his ear against the wood, straining to hear beyond the howling wind. Silence. Then, a single knock. Soft. Almost hesitant. John's breath hitched. His grip on the doorknob tightened. Who the hell would be out here at this hour? The knock came again. His first instinct was to ignore it, but the mother dog wasn't letting up. She inched forward, her growl growing lower, more dangerous. John reached toward the light switch, flooding the back porch with the dim yellow glow from the cabin's exterior bulbs. And then he saw them. Footprints in the snow. Fresh ones. Leading from the tree line straight to his door. His blood ran cold. John took a slow step back. The mother dog moved with him, keeping herself between the door and the pups. Then, a voice. Low. Rough. I know she's in there. John's stomach dropped. He swallowed, steadying his breath. Who's there? A long pause. Then. You have something that belongs to me. John's hands clenched. The mother dog barked, sharp and fierce, her body shaking with tension. John's mind raced. Could it be? Daniel Holloway. The abusive ex. John took another step back. His hands itched for the shotgun he kept under the kitchen counter. I don't know what you're talking about, he said carefully. A dry chuckle. Sure you do. The doorknob rattled. John lunged for the shotgun. He had spent years living in this cabin alone, away from trouble, away from people. He hadn't had to defend anything in a long time. But something told him this wasn't a man who would walk away empty-handed. The mother dog was shaking now. Not in fear. In rage. John had never seen a dog react this way. Her hackles were raised, her stance low, ready to attack. "I'll give you one chance," John warned. "Leave." Silence. Then, footsteps retreating. John held his breath. A minute passed. Then another. Nothing. Slowly, he edged toward the window, peeking outside. The footprints led away from the porch, disappearing back into the trees. The mother dog stayed alert, her ears still perked. John exhaled, stepping back. His hands were still shaking. Who the hell was that? He had a sinking feeling he already knew. And worse? He knew they'd be back. He turned toward the mother dog, her golden eyes locked onto his. "We're in trouble, aren't we?" he muttered. She didn't move. Didn't blink. Just stared. And somehow, John already knew the answer. Yes. John barely slept that night. He sat in the living room, his shotgun resting against the arm of his chair, his eyes locked on the back door. The mother dog hadn't moved from her spot either. She sat rigid, staring at the door, ears twitching at every little sound outside. The snowstorm had passed, leaving behind an eerie silence. Every creak of the wooden walls, every whisper of wind against the windows sent a chill down John's spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the frosted windows, John had made a decision. He was done waiting. He pulled out an old hunting camera from a storage box in the garage, dusting off the lens. It had been years since he'd used it, but it still worked just fine. He strapped it to a nearby tree, positioning it so it had a full view of the cabin's back door. If someone came snooping around again, he'd know. With the camera set, he took the mother dog and her pups inside, locking the doors behind him. He had no idea what the footage would show, but something deep in his gut told him he wouldn't like the answer. That night, the mother dog was restless. She paced near the door, whining softly, her tail low and stiff. John sat in his chair, gripping his shotgun a little tighter. Hours passed. Then, sometime past midnight, she froze. A low growl rumbled in her throat. John stiffened. Then he heard it. Crunch. The unmistakable sound of boots pressing into fresh snow. He held his breath, listening. Then, silence. Whoever was out there wasn't moving anymore. Were they watching? Waiting? John didn't dare check. He didn't want to scare them off. Instead, he let the camera do its job. By morning, the tension hadn't faded. The mother dog was still on edge, her gaze flicking between the door and the window as if she expected something to burst through at any moment. John retrieved the camera, bringing it inside with trembling fingers. He hooked it up to his laptop, his stomach twisting into knots. The footage loaded. At first, there was nothing but stillness. The empty backyard, the snow-covered trees, the dim glow of the porch light. Then, movement. A shadowy figure emerged from the trees. John leaned in, his pulse hammering. The figure moved cautiously, stepping closer to the house, stopping just outside the frame of the back door. They stood there for over an hour. Watching. John's blood ran cold. Then, as if sensing something, the figure turned toward the camera. And for a brief second, John saw his face. His breath caught in his throat. Daniel Holloway. The ex-boyfriend. Claire Dawson's abuser. The man who should have been in prison years ago. John's hands curled into fists. His stomach twisted with anger, with disgust, with fear. The mother dog hadn't come to his door by accident. She had been running from him. And now, he had found her again. John wasted no time. He drove straight to the police station, the footage loaded onto a flash drive, his heart pounding the entire way. Detective Harris, a no-nonsense officer John had known for years, watched the footage in silence. When it ended, he exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. "Well," Harris muttered. "That's about as clear as it gets." "You know him?" John asked, already knowing the answer. Harris nodded grimly. "Yeah. We had our suspicions back when Claire went missing, but there was never enough evidence to pin him down. He disappeared right after she did." John's jaw clenched. "And now he's back." Harris stared at the screen. "Looks like it. What now?" The detective sat back in his chair, his fingers drumming against the desk. "We set a trap." John blinked. "A trap?" Harris nodded. "He's been watching your house. He's not done. He wants something." His eyes flicked toward John. "Or someone." John's stomach tightened. He glanced at the mother dog, curled up on the floor beside his chair, her pups nestled safely against her. She had survived this long. But would she survive if Holloway came back? Harris leaned forward. "We use your house as bait." John swallowed hard. "And if he takes it?" Harris's expression darkened. "Then we make sure he never gets another chance." The night was still, the kind of silence that only came after a heavy snowfall. The moon cast a pale glow over John's cabin, making the icy landscape shimmer. Inside, the fire crackled softly, but John barely noticed. His focus was on the darkened tree line beyond his backyard. The police had set their trap. They weren't parked outside, weren't waiting in plain sight. Instead, they were hidden, stationed further down the road, watching through cameras and night vision scopes. Waiting for him to return. And John knew he would. The mother dog lay by the door, her golden eyes unblinking. She was listening, waiting, just like John. Then, a shadow moved in the trees. John's breath hitched. His grip tightened on the armrest of his chair. The figure stepped closer, slowly, carefully, just as he had the night before. He thought no one was watching. Closer. John swallowed hard, every muscle in his body tense. The mother dog let out a low growl, barely audible. Then, the porch creaked. A soft footstep against the wooden boards. John's pulse pounded. He was here. And then, red and blue lights flooded the yard. Shouting. Movement. Chaos. The figure turned to run. But before he could make it down the steps, the mother dog lunged. She didn't hesitate. Didn't forget. Didn't forgive. Her teeth sank into his arm, yanking him backward, dragging him down into the snow. He screamed, twisting, trying to break free, but she held on, snarling, growling, refusing to let go. John had never seen her like this. She wasn't just fighting, she was ending something. It took 3 officers to pull her off him. Daniel Holloway lay in the snow, bleeding, cuffed, gasping, defeated. It was over. The officers searched his car, his belongings, everything he had left behind. And in that search, they found the proof they needed: letters, documents, pieces of Claire Dawson's life that had been kept hidden for years. They finally had their answer. She hadn't run away. She hadn't disappeared. She hadn't survived. John's chest tightened as the truth settled in. The mother dog had been running all this time, not just from danger, but with a purpose. She had protected her pups. She had led them to safety. And in the end, she had found someone who would keep them safe. John looked down at her. She stood over Holloway's body, breathing hard, her ears still pinned back, her body still tense. But when she looked up at John, something in her eyes softened. It was over. She had won. The next morning, John made it official. He stood in the vet's office, signing the final adoption papers. The pups curled up beside his feet, their tiny bodies warm and safe. The mother dog sat beside him, calm for the first time in days. Whitaker handed him the paperwork. "What are you going to call her?" John looked at the mother dog. She had endured the worst kind of pain. She had lost everything. She had been hunted, chased, abandoned. But she had never stopped fighting. Never stopped protecting. Never stopped hoping. He scratched behind her ears, watching as she leaned into his touch. "Hope," he said. Her tail thumped against the floor. Backhand index pointing right, final message. She wasn't just running from danger. She was running toward the one person who could save her. Some bonds never break, even after the storm.